wake of World War II. But this scheme was designed basically to fill gaps. And the countries that were involved in that were obviously Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Rhodesia, Canada, and even Singapore contributed. This is what we had down here at Temora, 97 of them. That aircraft actually flew here during the Second World War. It's a Tiger Moth built by de Havilland's, and de Havilland's, of course, was a company that's origins came a little bit before World War I. An American aircraft, also a trainer, the Ryan STM, built by the Ryan Aircraft Corporation of the United States, and another Ryan, the PT-22 Recruit. Dave Salter in the Reed family Tiger Moth. All of these aircraft are very, very simple, but there is a big design philosophy change between the British. Just let you listen to the sound of these wonderful machines as they go past. You'll see the aircraft on the very right-hand side, the Ryan and the Tiger Moth, have what appear to be very similar engines. Well, they pretty much are. They're four-cylinder, inverted, air-cooled, inline engines. The other Ryan, out on the left-hand side, has a Kinner radial, a five-cylinder radial, about 160 horsepower, where the others are about 135. And the funny sound that you heard when you were when it was going through was actually that aircraft, because it has individual exhaust stacks. The Ryan aircraft are constructed in metal. It is a self-supporting or a monocoque structure, skins over frames with longerons. Tiger Moth first flew in 1931. The Ryans, the first of them, flew in the modifications that was undertaken. They built about 200 to 300 of the aircraft on this side, and they built about 1,400 of the Recruits. Now that was the basic training aircraft with an engine in it, and if you have a look you'll see the undercarriage is different. It is a lot more cranked forward, and it doesn't have that good look of the STM that's in the middle. The yellow aircraft in the lead today flown by Luke Kempton, the STM being flown by Nick Poole, and the fuselage, whereas the PT-22, it's circular. Even though they're built by the same company, and that evolved from the first one, it is considerably different. The Americans had a three Recruit, also the Stearman, a biplane, which was very much bigger than the Tiger Moth you see. This gave you the basics of flying. Then they would increase the number of systems, the complexity of the aircraft. The BT-13 was the next step that many American pilots took. We were hoping to have one here today, but unfortunately due weather couldn't be here. That was going to be flown by Luke. And then you went to advanced training. Now you can see some of the things that are being done up here now. That is Dave Salter. He only has a few hours flying, only about 34,000. And what he is doing is known as streamer strafing. Now this is a great thing for hand-eye coordination. Throws out a roll of Mr. Sorbent's finest and then tries to cut it as many times as possible before it gets to his lowest safe nominated altitude. That's why in the 60s and 70s, if you went to an aero club anywhere in Australia, there was a dearth of toilet paper, because this is what they were doing with it. This requires a great deal of skill, because he is trying to spot the streamer. He is also flying the aeroplane and very aware of his altitude. It takes a lot of coordination to be able to do that. Raffle that they have, $5 for 2 tickets. There's some great prizes there, but they are actually supporting our former servicemen and women, which is a fantastic cause. The Australian-built Windshield. Listen to the sound of the Harvard as it goes past. Much more aggressive sound, and there is a reason for that. That is basically the sound of the propeller tips going supersonic. Built aircraft such as the P-51 Mustang, the B-25 Mitchell bomber, later on the B-45 Tornado, which was one of the first jet bombers to go into the US Air Force infantry, F-86 Sabre, and right up to the twin supersonic XB-70 Valkyrie. That's a bomber that they only made 2 of. Again, both of these machines trainers. Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation was formed just before the outbreak of the Second World War, because Australian CEOs of the largest companies like BHP, Holden's, ICI, different shipping companies, they realised that we had no aviation industry and that war was going to break out. So they actually formed CAC, built a factory, sent a group overseas, and we started building aircraft here. Silver aircraft, here's the Windshield. We built 62 of those as trainers, trying not to get run over here.
Just put them in the back.
But with the Harvard T6 and SNJ, there were 15,400 plus built during the war. And they served with over 60 countries eventually. They're still performing the role of training people to step from an advanced trainer into a fighter aircraft. That's what they use for these days over in the United States, to transition onto aircraft like the Mustang, P-40, Spitfire, Sea Fury, that sort of thing. Gives a person heavy tail dragger performance. Windshield. It was used as our initial trainer. What it did, it took over from the Tiger Moth that we saw earlier, and also the Wirraway, which is similar to the Harvard, and it combined that into one role. It had a 450 horsepower engine in it, originally designed to take an Australian engine of the same horsepower, but what they found was it was a slightly heavier engine, it had a higher specific fuel consumption. So Pratt & Whitney, they had thousands of these R985 engines, and they just swapped it over. Americans have a very simple designation for their engines. I just mentioned R985. R for radial, where the cylinders are arranged radially around the crankcase. 985, number of cubic inches. The Harvard aircraft, 600 horsepower Pratt R1340, so it's a bigger engine, obviously more horsepower. The SNJ aircraft is calling in the Mustangs of 77 Squadron to attack a North Korean position. This example, one of the ones used by the Kiwis. The Kiwis used their aircraft right up until 1977. When the Winjil today is part of 100 Squadron. For those of you who were here earlier on, we explained what 100 Squadron is. 100 Squadron was basically formed that unit. Final fly past there by Sam. 100 Squadron definitely into which you plugged a rubber tube on either side. I'll just let you listen to the sound of this Beech 18 taking off. Yeah, the system was very simple. Beech 18 is being flown by Mekpool. He actually flew the Ryan STM in our first display. Beech 18 does harken back to those days prior to World War. Changed over to trying to manufacture aircraft like the Hudson bomber, one of which we have here, and also the twin-engine, twin-tail P-38 fighter. So this left the field wide open for Beechcraft. They had produced this machine for a future military requirement. And basically it was on spec. They'd only sold 39 of these prior to the outbreak of World War II, empowered by and they also built a modified version called the AT-11. And that was a training aircraft. And the AT-11 was fitted with a dorsal turret to train air gunners. It also had an internal bomb bay to train bomb aimers, and it was also used for navigation training. About 70% of the bomb aimers and navigators in World War II that flew with the United States Army Air Force, flying all sorts of aircraft, B-25s, B-24 Liberators, B-17s, were trained on the AT-11, which is the modified version of the Beech 18. Used by numerous air forces, it's a very rugged aircraft, extremely rugged, and aircraft until the rules changed. And this Harvard was one of the very first to fly under the new rules. Boris there taking off in the PC-9. That's Steve Morris Becker. And this is very spectacular. So I think we'll just let you watch what he does. This is a first, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first time that this aircraft has been displayed to the public. And it's not just this aircraft, it's the first time that any PC-9 in civilian hands has been displayed like this. This was our advanced training aircraft. We picked up 67 of these. They were built by the Pilatus Aircraft Corporation in Switzerland. We started operating them in 1987 and they flew right the way up to 2019. .950 shaft horsepower PT6, Pratt & Whitney Canada PT6 turboprop engine, and brilliantly flown by Steve, aka Boris. Steve's a former test pilot. Aircraft, as I said, the training machine for the RAAF, and its role now supplanted by the Pilatus PC-21, and we'll be seeing that flying later on as well. Many of you would have seen this for the first time, flying with the roulettes all the way around the country. Our RAAF aerobatic display team. They were also used by No. 2 Flying Training School at Pearce in Western Australia. Some of them were allocated to the Aircraft Research and Development Unit.
We need to buy stuff. I hate borrowing school like every second month. I don't think school is a big fan of it.
None of you would have seen a PC-9 displayed like this. Today, you see, using some aerodynamic braking there, just keep the nose up, slows the aircraft down. This aircraft is wearing the logo on the tail of the No. 2 Flying Training School. Of course, the roulettes have a very large stylised R on the vertical fin. And you see the Canberra taking off now down on our diagonal runway down there. That gives us the ability to fly heavier, early generation jet aircraft. Because prior to this, basically we only had the north-south and the very much shorter direct east-west runways. Recently opened, and of course we have the the coffee over here under our carport awning. Well, just while the bird dogs are taxiing out, we'll just have a quick word to Steve here. Mate, that was fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Boris Becker. That's the first time we've seen that display. It's the first time in Australia we've seen a civilian PC-9. Must be great.
Yeah, it's a bit of an honour to be able to present the PC-9 here.
Parafield. They were designed as a forward air control aircraft. Now, forward air control is what's undertaken by the Germans in aircraft like the Fiesler Storch, which was quite a large, I'll say large but light aircraft. It was also undertaken by Osters and the Piper L4 Grasshopper. And what they did was the same thing they did in World War I. They spotted artillery positions, troop positions, transport, stores, ammunition, all of that sort of thing. And right at the end of the war, actually one of the very last air combats in World War II was actually between an L4 Grasshopper, which is a very light tailwheel aeroplane, and a Fiesler Storch, and they were shooting it at each other with revolvers. Back to World War I. These aircraft were designed to take over from those fabric machines that operated in World War II. They were designed by Cessna, first flew in 1949, and they were a dedicated forward air control machine. And what we might do is just stop there and let you listen to the startup of these V12s. 2 Merlin engines, one in the Spitfire, one in the Mustang, and the Allison engine in the P40.
Thank you. So where will you be?
Don't forget the Integrated Service People's Association. They have their raffle over there. It's going to be drawn a little bit later on. $5 for 2 tickets, some great prizes there, and what you are doing is supporting an organisation that supports our former servicemen and women. Bird dogs taking off now. The green aircraft being flown by Al Clements, and the grey aircraft being flown by Dave Salter. The grey aircraft was actually flown and was one of 2 machines that were allocated to the Air Element Commander of Way City. That aircraft survived, ended up as Chief of Air Force, and then later the Chief of our Defence Force. Now, coming in from the left, you can see the 2 bird dogs there. Just a civilian aeroplane, but much, much more. It was basically a Cessna 170, which is a 4-seat aircraft. What did they do? They flew around at low level over the same area all the time. A pilot was allocated an area. He didn't just troll around anywhere he felt like it. In that regard, he could see what was going on. If there were more water buffalo in a field, big deal. No, that could be more food for the VC. Be watching paddy field and also the VC all over Vietnam. He noted all of these things and was telling his superiors about it, but they dismissed it until all hell broke loose. The early models were known as the L-19. Came out in 1949. A little clip on the back end of the tube, and if the pilot wanted to select, he'd select that particular tube or a salvo, hit the button, and as soon as he did that, electrical charge went through a wire on the back plate of the fins, and then set off the solid rocket fuel. The tube that was holding the rocket would go out, and as it went out, it was, I'll say, was a China-graph pencil. I'll let these guys fire up. Canberra bomber was designed with the same philosophy as the Mosquito. And get away unscathed. The concept for the Canberra started actually around about 1943-44. Didn't fly until 1949 when the configuration was finally worked out. You'll see the wing is very, very deep. Got a very large wing area. As I said, designed as an unarmed bomber, but if you have a look at the nose of this aircraft, you can see a plexiglass bomb aimer's position reminiscent of that of the B-17 and the Lancaster. This was Britain's fighter that could do 500 miles an hour. At the end of the war, we were building the 4-engined Avro Lincoln bomber. Now, those aircraft served in the Malayan emergency. It's a B-2. And being British, it has to have some wood in it. So the vertical fin, the front edge of that, is all wood. Operating, of course, in these tropical environments, 750-pound bomb. We'll let you listen to the Mustang and the V12s as they take off and talk a little bit more about the Canberra. To me, the most beautiful aircraft out of World War II. P-40, flown by Al Arthur, who owns that PC-9. Doug Hamilton owns the Mustang and is flying it today. Don't be alarmed, that is very normal for a P-40 undercarriage retraction. Looks a bit like a ruptured duck. Name on his aircraft, the Angel of Death, but he was told to take that off, so he swapped it, and all of his aircraft became the Dove of Peace. Kitty Hawk, the green aircraft, owned by Al Arthur, in the markings of number 112 Fighter Squadron RAF, operating in the Italian campaign. Spitfire in the markings of Wing Commander, the first fighter to be able to accompany the bombers all the way from England to Berlin and back. And then undertook what they called the VLR missions in the Pacific, very long range. Sometimes those missions lasted over 8 hours. You can see the three very different plan forms of the wings there. The Mustang, certainly the instant recognition feature of the Spitfire. P-40 wing, of a P-40 with about 30 to 40% of its left wing shot off. RAAF aircraft that managed to get back to base. The Canberra in our hangar. The Spitfire. With 12 machine guns, sorry, 8 machine guns, 12 was the Hurricane, going up to machine guns and cannons, and then ending the war with 4 20mm cannons, which became the standard British fighter armament. They fitted this new Allison V12, the V1710. It was much slimmer than in the early models because it had a longer reduction gear, and that reduction gear is what takes the power from the crankshaft through to the propeller. They were the ones with the long, slim nose, but they all had the radiator and oil cooler under the nose, just in a much more streamlined form. This is a little bit more brutish. Four principal production models of the. And as we look at the Spitfire coming in, we also have the Mustang flown by Doug Hamilton. The Mustang owes its origins to the British. The British and the French sent purchasing commissions to the United States before the outbreak of war because they could see what was going to happen and know that they needed aircraft for the service and that also their manufacturing would be within the range of the Kindleberger were there, and they said, we want you to build these aircraft. That was in March 1940. The prototype didn't fly until October 1940. It incorporated the laminar flow wing. It had a high-backed fuselage in those days. The Americans actually didn't show much interest in it. If any of you have heard of the intertropic convergence zone, that's where you have the northern hemisphere weather and the southern hemisphere weather. That's where they meet. Unique formation. Our PC-21, a very unique photo opportunity this. He was able to, on R&R, to confirm those two aircraft. So it didn't happen until 1962. See the big shark mouth markings on this aircraft, the Mark 8, as the PC-21 comes in at warp 9. Now this looks similar to turboprop. This is about 1650 horsepower. You'll see the wing is very different as well. It is stressed for much heavier aerobatic use, and it has a much higher top speed. And it is very unique in that the aircraft is part of a system. Flown today because it's getting a really good ring out with a performance demonstration. We have 49 of these machines, whereas cadet pilot from the instructor, and that ramps up as the pilot is going through his training. Very high speed wing on that. These aircraft are also operated by number 2 FTS over in Pierce, plus the Singaporean Air Force has a squadron there used for training purposes. Air controllers. Again, forward air control has really come into the fore over the different wars that we've had. And it has really become an art form, including airborne and ground-borne people.